The possibilities of an alternate dimension or parallel universe has fascinated scientists and science fiction fans alike for decades. Advances in theoretical and even practical physics in recent times means more and more scientists are exploring the possibility that there are worlds that may parallel with our own. Some believe those alternate universes occasionally come into contact with ours, leaving behind a lasting mark when they connect. This theory has been used to explain everything from the Mandela effect to the Bermuda Triangle mysteries. For some disappearances, one of the only explanations that seems to make sense is the suggestion that missing persons have vanished off the face of the planet. These are 5 such cases. Number 5. The disappearance of Louis Le Prince is the most famous case on our list. Despite the attention though, we're no closer to unraveling the mystery. Le Prince was a French artist and inventor, now acknowledged as the first person in history to shoot a moving picture using a camera that he invented. He was truly a pioneer in an age of invention. His work was years ahead of others who once thought that they were the fathers of moving pictures. However, before Le Prince had a chance to demonstrate his new technology in the United States, he disappeared. In 1890, Le Prince traveled from his home in Leeds, England to visit his brother Arthur in Dijon. From there, he planned to stay for several days before traveling to Paris by train and then on to the US. On the 16th of September, Arthur took his brother to the train station where he said goodbye to him for a final time. Arthur watched him board, then watched the express line train pull out of the station. When it arrived in Paris, though, Louis was missing. Family and friends waited in the French capital and were shocked to find that Louis was missing and his luggage had disappeared too. There were no stops between Dijon and Paris. No passengers on the train noticed anything out of the ordinary, and Arthur hadn't seen anything suspicious at the train station. The emergency exits on board the train hadn't been used, and Le Prince had simply vanished. Police were immediately involved and searched the train thoroughly, but there were no traces of the inventor. Many conspiracy theories were conjured after his disappearance. Some were suspected at the time, while others were argued by his admirers over a century later. Some suspect Arthur, the last person to have seen Louis, had something to do with the disappearance. The theory is that Arthur killed his brother before the train actually left Dijon. Louis was never on board in the first place. There's no clear motive for such an attack, though some suggest financial gain. However, the murder would have been out of character for Arthur. According to friends and family, the motive doesn't even make any sense. It also seems other travelers saw Louis at the station and saw him board the train that day. Another theory that has gained popularity in more recent years is the possibility that Le Prince was assassinated by someone working for his rival, Thomas Edison. Edison was working on his own moving picture camera at the time and filed for a patent not long after Le Prince's disappearance. Le Prince's own work was used to try to prevent the patent, but Edison succeeded. Le Prince wouldn't get the recognition he deserved for decades. Again, this theory has its flaws, even though it would make an intriguing story. No disturbances were reported on the train, and a body has never been found, nor has Le Prince's luggage. For now, it seems that all traces of Le Prince have disappeared from the train, as if he simply slipped into another dimension. Number 4. Thelma Melton, or Polly, was out hiking with her friends on Deep Creek Trail in North Carolina when she went missing. She'd been hiking for 20 years, and the trail was an easy route that she'd visited frequently, but even so, she was the slowest member of the group. Polly was slightly overweight and suffered with high blood pressure. Her friends actually joked with her about her slow pace on the trip. For some reason, Polly rushed a little way ahead of her 2 friends, and she turned a bend, then she was gone. The 2 women followed Polly just moments later, but she was nowhere to be seen. Her friends searched the area, knowing she couldn't have gone far with her fitness level, but there was no sign of the 58-year-old. Thinking Polly must have gone back to the campsite where her husband was parked, her friends headed back, but Polly's husband hadn't seen her since she left for the hike. The police were called at 6 p.m. Polly's tracks should have been easy to follow. Her left shoe had a crack in the sole, leaving behind prints that were clearly distinguishable from her friends. But the tracks proved difficult to follow, and police were unable to trace Polly at all. Some suspect that Polly may have staged her own disappearance. She'd allegedly been acting strangely at work the day before she vanished, making a number of phone calls, something she never usually did. The theory goes that she met a secret lover while on the trail and ran away with them. For any staged disappearance to work, she would have needed help as her medication meant she had no driver's license. Her friends would also have needed to be in on the disappearance, which police don't believe to be the case. A team of over 150 searchers and 9 sniffer dogs scored the area for Polly, but turned up nothing. In almost 40 years since her disappearance, no traces of Polly have ever been found. At this stage, it's unlikely we'll ever get a definitive answer to the mystery. Number 3. Despite being 77 years old, Elizabeth OPray was an active woman in good health with a good sense of humor. She frequently went on long walks along scenic routes near Katoomba Airfield in New South Wales, Australia. On the afternoon of March 7, 2016, Elizabeth set off on one such walk. Neighbors spotted her on nearby streets, and CCTV footage from the United Service Station caught her heading towards the train station. At around 4:30 p.m., Elizabeth's daughter, Kate, grew worried and set off with her husband to find her. They drove around the streets they knew that she liked to walk, but there was no sign of her. When Elizabeth hadn't made it home by 11 p.m., Kate reported her missing. Kate and police repeatedly tried to contact Elizabeth on her mobile, an old Nokia phone which had no GPS abilities. As a search and rescue operation got underway the following morning, Kate tried to call her mother. Surprisingly, Elizabeth answered. Elizabeth knew she was missing and knew people were looking for her. She'd seen the helicopters being used in the search effort, but she was lost and couldn't tell Kate where she was. The officer in charge of the search operation also spoke to Elizabeth. Her phone was almost out of battery life, so he told her to call when she saw the helicopter that would soon be flying overhead again. The phone call should have been the break in the case that Elizabeth needed, but it only left police with more questions. Using cell phone towers, police believed they were able to triangulate the rough area where Elizabeth was. However, as the search wore on, it seemed more and more likely that technology had failed and they were looking in the wrong place. Elizabeth made 2 more calls to her daughter, but only a faint rustling noise could be heard. Police believed that they were accidental calls. At around 11 p.m., 24 hours after Elizabeth was reported missing, police called her again. It rang twice and then stopped because her phone had died. Police continued to search the area, but to this day, Elizabeth remains missing. It shouldn't have been possible for Elizabeth to have disappeared to some place she didn't recognize. Together with the phone logs given to police, the wrong location, and the strange rustling, there's a case to be made that Elizabeth was no longer in this dimension. Number 2. The disappearance of Martha Wright is one of the most eerie unexplained events in New York history. In 1975, Martha and her husband Jackson decided to brave a snowstorm to travel from New Jersey into New York City via the Lincoln Tunnel. A 1.5-mile tunnel is usually very busy, but Jackson claimed it was empty when he drove through, possibly due to the storm. Due to condensation on the windshield, Jackson was forced to pull over at the far end of the tunnel. He got out to clear the windshield before heading back into the snow, while Martha volunteered to clear the rear window. When he finished, Jackson looked up to find his wife was nowhere to be seen. There was no way Martha could have left without him noticing, with no reason why his wife would want to. Jackson contacted police but immediately became the prime suspect in her disappearance. However, beyond the unbelievable story, there was no evidence of foul play. Martha was never found. It's easy to question the authenticity of the story, especially as it's now become an urban legend in the city. Many wonder how such a busy tunnel could have been deserted, even in a snowstorm. Perhaps then it was Jackson rather than his wife that slipped into another dimension. Our dimension. Number 1. On July 18, 2007, Barbara Baalak left her home in Montana to hike a local trail with a friend. Barbara was an experienced hiker. She'd walked the trail countless times before and took great pride in showing off the scenery on her doorstep to visiting friends. She also knew the dangers, carrying with her a gun to protect herself against mountain lions and other predators. Barbara and her husband Carl were hosting Carl's cousin and her friend, Jim Ramaker. They spent the night socializing and drinking, and the following morning, Carl's cousin felt hungover. Carl himself was enjoying a lie-in, but Barbara and Jim were keen to head out to the trail. Barbara woke her husband to let him know that they were heading out and would be back in a few hours. Barbara and Jim arrived at Bear Creek Overlook Trail early in the morning. They hiked for around 40 minutes, occasionally stopping to take in the beautiful scenery. At one point, they passed by 2 other men who were hiking the trail but didn't stop to chat. Eventually, they decided to head back to the parking lot where Jim's vehicle was parked. It was on this journey that Barbara disappeared. Jim was only 20 or 30 feet away from Barbara when he stopped to take in the scenery. He looked away for 60 seconds, but when he looked back, Barbara was gone. Jim spent hours searching for Barbara, asking construction workers if they had seen her and eventually calling police. An intense search followed, with radar helicopters and search parties searching the area, but no trace of Barbara was ever found. Barbara's husband doesn't believe she would have just walked away. Even if she had, Jim would have heard. It was impossible for anybody to have crept up on them or away from Jim on a loose shale. Police are still searching for 2 men that Jim and Barbara bumped into on their hike. Neither are suspects, but police want to confirm Barbara was actually on the hike with Jim. Jim has been cooperative with police, but one theory suggests that Barbara had already been killed and the hiking story was simply a cover-up. However, most agree if it was a cover-up, Jim would have come up with a better story than that she disappeared into thin air. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.